Ben, it's wonderful to see you. Ben and I were colleagues for a number of years in Long Island, where he was in Jericho, and I was at that particular time in Merrick. And we always thought this is a great up-and-coming young colleague, and haven't seen anything since, which would lead me to change my mind. So without further ado, I hope you'll, now you're based in Miami, and I know you're doing great things there. I hope everybody will absolutely love your presentation. Honored to be on with you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Hoffman. We go by Scott and Ben. We're very informal. By the way, I tried to get rid of this halo effect by propping up all the books. I am specifically in one room, which does not have good lighting, so that I don't wake up my kids or my wife. However, maybe it's good to have a halo effect, as the sun will be coming up momentarily and we prepare to receive the Torah. But I do thank Flow Video, Kurt. I think actually Jamie worked with me, and I appreciate it. Before we get started with my PowerPoint, I have a source sheet in the packet and also PowerPoint, which are slightly different. I want to talk about what is this world to come. And I'll start off with the joke. And it's a goodie, but oldie but goodie, if you will. So with the NBA playoffs about to start, Tom and Matt played a pickup game of basketball each and every week. And they often wondered as they got older, what is it like in heaven? What's going to happen in heaven? And they promised that the first one to reach there would tell the other what would happen. So as they get older, Matt unfortunately passes away, and Tom is mourning his friend, but his friend Matt appears to him in a dream, and he says, "Great news, there's basketball, and it's a lot of fun, and you are actually going to be, Tom, the starting point guard." So Tom says, "Wow, that's so wonderful." Matt replies, "Not so great, actually. They have you starting tomorrow night." So where does that leave us? I know that's kind of in, don't get reactions from people. That's one you probably heard before, but where does this leave us? What is this world to come? What does it mean? We often think Christianity is about heaven and hell, yet we have our own versions of this in Judaism. And whereas for us, heaven is Shamayim, what is above. Hell, we don't know. It could be Sheol, the underworld. I'll show you a picture of that in my presentation. It could be Gehenna, the fiery furnace, except Gehenna is really Gehinnom, the Hinnom Valley outside of Jerusalem. I don't know why that was determined by the rabbis as being the place for sinners to go. But it leads to one other story before we begin sharing the PowerPoint. At the University of Wisconsin, I hosted a Lunch and Learn series with different rabbis. And one rabbi I invited was at the time the rabbi at Beth Israel Congregation in Madison, Rabbi Kenneth Katz. And I said, "I want you to teach about the afterlife." To which Rabbi Katz started by saying, "Here are 3 Jewish views of the afterlife. You decide which one you believe in or none of them." And I left as a black and white thinker at the time. And I'm like, "Rabbi, I wanted the answer. I wanted tachlis. I wanted to know, what is the afterlife? What is the world to come?" And of course, there's no answer to this. But Judaism has some fascinating things to say about the world to come. And it is in that light that I want to begin presenting my PowerPoint presentation. So Kurt or Jamie, thank you so much. We often think, what is the reward for observing commandments? Shavuot, we celebrate the giving of the Torah, not just the 10 commandments, but all 613. And we think, is it a reward, whether in extrinsic or intrinsic reward? And is that reward observed in this world or in the next? Please change the slide. So some guiding questions. Is there a reward in observing commandments? How about in avoiding sin? There's a principle in Judaism, Shev ve'al ta'aseh. If I just sit and I don't do a transgression, that could be something that would lead to me getting rewarded. Second question, is quality of observance more important? We talk about Kidor Mitzvah, beautifying commandments, making a commandment your own. Is that what is most important? Or is it quantity of commandments observed? I know we often say quality over quantity, but the rabbinic sources aren't so clear. They seem to indicate that quantity could matter. Third, do some commandments receive more of a reward than others? And are some sins more cursed or punished than others? And finally, is a reward received in this world or in the world to come? Is there even a world to come? If you could please turn the slide. All right. So, what is the world to come? It's not mentioned once in the Torah. Olam Haba does not appear once in the Torah, but it's mentioned in rabbinic literature. So we have these great cartoons. I believe in God because I live in heaven. We have Gal Gadot on The Simpsons in Jewish heaven, if you will. And of course, an image, one of the many images that we might see of heaven, the shining light forth. And I like this one because it combines Mayim, or the waters, with Shamayim, the sky. We know that they were separated on the second day, and the light comes forth as we go through the pearly gates of heaven. So what is the world to come? What does this mean? Well, according to rabbinic literature, it abounds. And I'm only going to give you two sources due to our limited time on the world to come. One is a famous one. We often start this when we study Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers, from Mishnah Sanhedrin 10:1. Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek lo'olam haba. All the Jewish people, or I can say all of Israel, to be a little broader, have a share in the world to come. Now, isn't that beautiful? That everyone in Israel, however we want to define it, has a share in the world to come. So it doesn't matter what I do or who I am, I have a share in the world to come. Except for those of us who know the text, that's not where the text ends. And we have to go on and really see the ending of the text. This text is beautiful, and it goes on to say, Netzer mata'ai le'itpa'er, you are my plantings, and you will grow and be glorious. And it's a beautiful text. But like so many things in rabbinic literature, it's easy to take them out of context. So let's see how this is taken out of context. Let's continue on with the next slide. This is a continuation of Sanhedrin. These are the exceptions. These people have no share in the world to come. And the commentary here, this is not directly, the bold is a direct text. This is commentary. This is from Sefaria. Even when they have fulfilled many mitzvot. So even if I do a great quantity of mitzvot, if I do one of these things, I will lose my place in the world to come. One who says there's no resurrection of the dead derived from the Torah. So those of us, let's pause for a second. Resurrection of the dead. Wait a second. We say every day, 3 times a day, Baruch atah Hashem mechayeh hametim, the one who revives the dead, or if you prefer, gives the dead eternal life. There are all these poetic translations, but the belief is that the dead will be resurrected when the Messiah comes. We end Yigdal. Every holiday, we did it last night, Meitim Yechayel. We end by saying that the dead shall be resurrected. And if one does not believe in this, or literally in the coming of the Messiah, because this is a step that the Messiah will take, then one is denied entry into the world to come according to Sanhedrin. One who says the Torah did not originate from heaven. So I'm in trouble, as are my JTS professors, because we believe in biblical criticism. Torah, unless you have a very liberal take on what that means, Torah from heaven, Torah min hashamayim, that's problematic for us, because one who says the Torah did not originate from heaven, it's not from heaven, is denied a place in the world to come. Now, what does that mean? Well, the Torah can mean different things. Torah means instruction. Torah can mean the 5 books of Moses. Torah can mean all of written and oral Torah. It can even mean things we haven't even, if I want to be as broad in my definition of Torah as possible, it can even mean things which have not yet been discovered, but responsa will be written about. But in any event, if I say Torah is not from the heavens, I'm denied my place in the world to come. And an epikoros. Epikoros comes from the Greek Epicurean, and it means a heretic, one who treats Torah scholars and the Torah they teach with contempt. A classic example of this is Acher, namely Elisha ben Abuya, who uprooted the shoots. He became an apostate, and he tried to deliberately lead people astray from Torah. Okay, so these seem to be accepted by everyone, or at least the Tanakama, the first anonymous source. But then we have some additional takes. Rabbi Akiva says, also included in these exceptions are one who reads external literature. What does that mean, external literature? Now, Maimonides based a lot of what he learned on Aristotle. Philo, the great Jewish philosopher, based it on Plato. That external literature, Devarim Chitzoniyim, I don't know. I read external literature all the time. So by which I mean things which are not directly Torah. It depends how we interpret it. Now, this one is very strange to some of us, but it's important to mention. One who whispers invocations over a wound and says as an invocation for healing, every illness that I placed upon Egypt, I will not place upon you, for I am the Lord your healer. Now, I originally would think what's going on here is I'm claiming to be God, that I can heal my wounds. This is actually read right after the Song of the Sea. But according to the commentary in Sefaria, what it means is by doing so, you show contempt for the sanctity of the name of God. Therefore, you have no share in the world to come. You're taking God's name in vain by saying saying an incantation over a wound. And Abba Shaul adds, one who pronounces the ineffable name of God as is written with this letters, that is Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, that is not G-D, that's for another time, but that is literally reciting the Tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name of God. We have a picture here of Sheol, the underworld. I didn't want to give a picture of Gehenna, I could have given the Hinnom Valley, but I didn't want to give a picture of a fiery furnace, even though we often believe heaven and hell are Christian concepts. Well, guess what? Christianity came out of Judaism. So whereas we don't necessarily believe that faith in God, interestingly here, is not said as a criteria for making into the world to come. That's not listed here. But we do have criteria that would exclude one. So this doesn't leave us feeling so good. So I have to show there's a flip side. There's another Talmudic text as we change the slide. We're going to adjust. We're going to look at Kiddushin. Here we go. And if we want a positive text, here we go. Anyone who performs one mitzvah, mitzvah echat, has goodness bestowed upon him. Metivin lo, marichin lo yamav, his life is lengthened, and he inherits the land, nochel et haaretz. And what does that mean? It could be inherit the land of Israel. Well, Sefaria says that means you inherit life in the world to come by performing one mitzvah. Anyone who does not perform one mitzvah does not have goodness bestowed upon him. His life is not lengthened. He does not inherit the land of the world to come. So one mitzvah, that's all we need. And as I put here, mitzvah gorer mitzvah, one mitzvah leads to another. And one transgression leads to another as well. But this text continues as well. So let's see the continuation, please. Rabbi Yehuda said, this is what the Mishnah is saying, anyone who performs one mitzvah in addition to his other, or I should say his or her other merits, and thereby tips the scale of all their deeds to the sake of righteousness, has goodness bestowed upon him or her, and is comparable to one who fulfills the entire Torah. And Reb Shmaya said, if one's sins and merits are of equal balance, they're equal, then one mitzvah tilts the scale in their favor. I don't find this to be a very helpful image, because who knows, first of all, this idea that our scales are weighted and that one deed tips the balance. There are great stories about this, that someone did one thing and then they ended up in the world to come, as opposed to Gehenna. But I don't like this idea because it can create great anxiety. Where am I on the scale? Is there someone looking over me? God, the man with the beard in the sky. I don't like this idea, but what I prefer is what the Mishnah teaches. The Mishnah teaches if I do one mitzvah, and I can only do one mitzvah at a time, if I focus in on that mitzvah, then I will inherit, things will go well with me, God willing, if I'm focused on that one mitzvah, rather than this idea, what were my merits and demerits in the past? I don't find that to be a very helpful way of looking at things. If we'll continue with the next slide. I have a few more slides. And then if Rabbi Hoffman has some comments at the end, I would welcome them. What is the reward for mitzvot? There's so many takes in literature. I did not give most of them because I found them to be a bit offensive. For example, Ibn Ezra says, oh, the non-Jews were engaged, couldn't even grasp the notion of the world to come. Sadia Gaon says they were idolaters, so therefore the world to come would mean nothing to them. I find it more helpful to look at Maimonides' framework. If you observe God with joyfulness and observe God's way, God will bestow in abundance these blessings upon you and set at a distance the curses from you, so that you will be at leisure to grow wise in the wisdom of Torah and to busy yourself therein, so that you merit life in the world to come, to do good in the world which is good, to prolong your days in the world which is unending, and you will find yourselves acquiring two worlds, good living in this world and the life in the world to come. Why do I love this text? Because often in rabbinic literature, they were trying to answer theodicy. Why do bad things happen to good people? And they said the following. They said, well, those bad people are getting rewarded in this world, but come the world to come, they'll get their just deserts. Whereas those tzaddiks, those righteous people, are suffering in this world, but come the world to come, they'll get rewarded. And maybe that worked as an answer for why Rome prospered while we were in exile. That doesn't necessarily work as an answer today. What works as a better answer, I think, is what Maimonides says, that we need to observe God with joyfulness, as we say every day. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. We need to observe God's way. And by finding good in the world, we will enjoy good living in this world, as well as a life in the world to come, whether or not there is a world to come. I do believe that there is, but that we don't know what it is. That you can, by serving through joy, you can experience both. And no matter what one's going through, granted, I know people with terrible tragedies. Rabbi Estes talked about Psalms of Lament and how important they are. No matter what people are going through, if we try to find a positive outlook, not a rationalization, but if we try to find joy in whatever we're going through, not always so easy to do, then hopefully we can find the good in things and we can have good living in this world and, God willing, in what is to come, whatever that may be. One more slide. Maimonides continues with one more slide. We were assured in the Torah, if we observe it, enjoy our goodness and soul, and meditate constantly in its wisdom, God will detach all things which prevent us from observing it. Would that this would be so. I have to mention with the violence in Israel, this is my prayer, that those who are observing Torah, and I mean Torah in this broadest sense, not only scrupulously following ritual commandments, but also doing the right thing and doing it out of pure joy, that all our trouble, sickness, war, famine, and the like will be eradicated, and God will be bountiful unto us by giving us all good, which sustains our hands to observe Torah, as plenty, peace, and increase in silver and gold, so that we will not be occupied with things of bodily need, but instead be at leisure to study wisdom and observe the precept to acquire life in the world to come. This doesn't mean study Torah all day at the expense of everything else. Maimonides was a physician. He was a physician to the Sultan. But he's saying that by following Torah for its own sake, God will provide us with opportunities to live in peace, to be able to have the material needs that we need. Not that we should use Torah to get rich quick, but that we should utilize Torah to fulfill our worldly needs and to strengthen, I would say, who we are and what we do each and every day. Okay, next slide, please. Hello? I have just a couple more slides, and I don't, perfect. To walk with God, we see this with Enoch, we see this with Noah, and we see this with Abraham. This is from Bechukotai, we read it 2 weeks ago. If you follow my laws, what will happen? I will walk among you, I will be your God, and you shall be my people. Sounds easy enough, but what Rashi says is that I will, as it were, walk with you in the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden, world to come. Or you could say with another source, which we don't have time for today, Pardes, paradise, as though I were one of you and you would not be frightened of me. It's the opposite of what we often see. We often see that when the giving of the Torah, everyone was frightened, either because they overslept, as Hannah had referenced, or because they heard God's booming voice, their souls departed from them, they needed Moses, the intermediary. The goal is for God to be able to walk among us and for us not to be frightened. And maybe it's each of us is made in the image of God. So for each of us to be able to walk amongst God or creations of God and to not be frightened. And why did I present this text? Because of the Kuzari. If you'll go to the next slide, please. The Torah does hint at the world to come according to Yehuda Levi when it writes, I shall be ever present in your midst. It's referring to the Shekhinah, the feminine presence of God, and the virtuous Jewish souls in this world, that we can deduce the following. If the soul can cling to the Shekhinah in this world, surely it will be able to cling to the Shekhinah in the non-physical world to come. The Shekhinah is a feminine aspect of God. It is the most earthly aspect of God. We've just spent a week, this last week of the Omer, engaged in Shekhinah. And one of the symbols of it is minding our speech. And by engaging in the Shekinah, the part of God that we can connect to and directly relate to, by doing that in this world, we can definitely do that in the world to come. What does he mean by the non-physical world to come? I leave that to you. But I want to conclude with one more slide. And what does it mean to experience the world to come? I can't tell you, but I can have our tradition tell you. So, Talmud Brachot says we've got mnemonics, 5, 6, and 10. And we're going to focus on 5. There are 5 matters in the world which are 1/60th in their most extreme manifestations. 1/60th means a taste, literally. I taught a class on kashrut on Wednesday. If my little bit of milk falls into my beef stew, if it's less than 1/60th the portion of milk to the meat, then it's still considered kosher. 1/60th meat or more means you have the taste, the ta'am of the milk. So that's where this image of taste comes in. So here are the 5 things: fire, honey, Shabbat, sleep, and a dream. Our fire is 1/60th of the fire of Gehenna, the fire of hell. I'm not going to dwell on that. Honey is 1/60th of manna. You think you've tasted the sweetness of honey? I had a sore throat. I had my kumkum ready, and I have tea with honey. And you think honey is sweet? Well, nothing compared to the taste of manna. Shabbat is 1/60th of the world to come. And for that, we add days when we cease from work. Shavuot counts as one of those too. This is Mein Olam Haba. This is a taste of the world to come, being able to just study Torah and engage in Torah and accepting things as they are, not trying to change the world. This is the closest we get to a taste of the world to come. Sleep, 1/60th of death. When we go to bed, we say Shema. We don't know if we're going to wake up. And we say, B'yad chavti ruchi. I entrust into God my ruach, one dimension of my soul. And when I wake up, I say, Modani shechazarta binishmati. My neshama, a higher level of my soul, has woken up. I'm even more conscious of God when I wake up. And a dream is 1/60th of prophecy. I know I'm almost out of time. I'll let Rabbi Hoffman make one quick comment after I read one more text, because I didn't deal with this quality or quantity. Pirkei Avot, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi teaches the following: be as careful with a minor mitzvah as with a weighty one. You do not know the reward given for mitzvot. So in other words, don't think that Shabbat observance is more important than shatnez, not mixing linen and wool. Everyone picks on shatnez. We don't know. It's like the game of life. We don't know what our tokens are worth when we cash them in at the end. We do things lishma, we do them for their own sake. We don't do them lekabel pras, to receive a reward. We do them because they are the right thing to do. They bring us closer to God, and they enable us to really utilize Torah, this blueprint for the life in which we live in the world. Any comments, Rabbi Hoffman, in the 2 minutes we have?
Well, first of all, thank you, Ben Yashikov. Great to see you again, in a manner of speaking, though I'd prefer to have lunch with you at Ben's, but this isn't bad. Let me ask you, you alluded in the talk to, I think you were alluding to the book, Why Bad Things Happen to Good People, the book of Harold Kushner. I think you somehow put that in.
Yes. And when bad things happen to good people, we have to be careful.
Okay, on Schuldig Mir, but I assume you had that in mind somewhere in your head. I wonder if you have reread the book recently, or you read it at different points in your rabbinate, and did your feelings change? Was there a certain arc you could detect based on the amount of time you'd spent away from, say, the academic side of JTS and more in the pragmatic side of Jericho or Miami or Arizona or something like that? I mean, do you see yourself moving along that arc on the base of your own life experience, or do you feel you've been pretty consistent on that?
It's funny. I'm going to give you a 1-minute answer on that, and I'm glad you asked that. When I had my rabbinical school interview, Rabbi Michal Springer asked me if I had any doubts, and I said, I was 21. No, I don't have any doubts. So she said, what happens if you do? I said, I'll deal with them as they come. And since rabbinical school and being a rabbi, I've witnessed great tragedies. I've witnessed the loss of children. I witnessed the loss of a friend at 28 to rhabdomyosarcoma. I've witnessed terrible things that are unjust. And I do have Rabbi Kushner's book on my bookshelf. I have not read it recently, but that's a good project for Chag. Maybe I will look at it when I go into the synagogue today for services. But my thoughts have changed from the intellectual, trying to come up with a rationalization. I was very much a black and white thinker, to more to the spiritual, that we don't know the reason why things happen, and that logic has fallacies in and of itself, but through experience, we can try to come to answers for ourselves and view religion not as part of the problem, but as part of the solution. That does not detract from what Rabbi Estes was teaching. We need times, as Rabbi Neil Gilman of blessed memory said, when we have a God we can yell out at or shout out at in anger. But we also need to have opportunities to admit that we're not God. We don't have the answers. We can, as much fun as this rabbinic literature is, I don't know what's true, Sanhedrin or Kiddushin. And I'm sure my views on it, like many of ours, will change, hopefully all of ours, through life experience.